28th of July 2023. The weather is a good deal better in rural Ireland today. Liars, liars, cars on fire, electric cars burn. Now, the BBC World News, I have it here, and it starts off with Trump accused of asking employee to delete footage. So it's Trump, Trump, Trump. And the idiots do not seem to have the intelligence to understand that the people who read their stuff are not voters. They don't have a vote. It's the American people chose the president, not the Irish and not the British, and a good thing too. It goes on then an article about Neil Oliver on, I think he's GB News, disputing their climate figures. And I actually think that my videos are being checked by people. A lot of the information I give over here is deliberately given to inform my viewers, but it's also given to upstage and to trouble our government, etc. So what they say here is false claims of bogus heatwave spread online. So they're saying it's false claims of bogus fires, of bogus heatwave spreads online. Yeah. Now, in addition to Neil Oliver, Paul Joseph Watson has a very good site as well. Very well worth watching. He's very much on my side. So we see there's nothing about the fact that the Fremantle Highway, this ship is the length of from the O'Connell Monument in O'Connell Street in Dublin to the front door of the GPO in Dublin. It's the length of 3/4 way up on the, or full way up at the back of Hill 16 in Croke Park to well way up the back of the spectator area of the opposite side. So it's more than the length of Croke Park football pitch, and it's a little shorter than the total length if you take all the buildings and the seating and all that. So it's a big ship, and it has a draft of 9 meters, and its width is 32 meters. The ship is 18,500 tons unladen weight. That is a lot of steel, and it's mostly constructed of steel. One crew member lost his life and 23 jumped overboard, and I make the point, why would you jump overboard? The only reason is that the fire took place in a lower deck, and it burned like a gas cooker under a saucepan, and it heated the upper deck to such a degree that the boots and shoes of the sailors began to melt, and the heat began to become too intolerable. You don't jump into the North Sea without a very, very good reason, and there must have been nowhere to get away from this inferno. Now, of course, the Irish media outlet, state media, radio, television, Sheridan, RTE, which is different to this, it leads with Sinead O'Connor and different things, but it does not mention this either. Now, the area where the Fremantle Highway is in distress is beside the Wadden Sea, which is an internationally recognised heritage area for wildlife of all sorts. It's a unique wildlife area, and if that ship goes down near it, it will be an ecological disaster. An ecological disaster. The Wadden Sea, you can look it up. It's a UNESCO heritage site, the same as Newgrange is in Ireland, and Skellig Michael is in Ireland, and the Great Pyramids. Yet there's no concern at all on British or Irish media, because they do not want to damage the image of electric cars as they try to roll them out and get people to invest their money when their own politicians won't buy them, their own police forces won't buy them. Both in Britain and in Ireland, there are no electric vehicles worth talking about. And the hydrogen buses Eamon Ryan was talking about, I don't see many of them around the city either. And my people in Dublin that report to me don't see many of them either. Okay, so you see they're closed down. There's also several articles about this being misrepresented and that people are jumping to conclusions. Now, there's a few facts I want to put across here. A few facts. One, a fire needs a fuel, usually a carbon-based fuel or a cellulose-based fuel, paper, oil, petrol, diesel, coal, peat, or whatever. It needs a fuel, which usually gives off some form of carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. One of the earliest examples of this is the invention of gunpowder. If you put the fuel in the barrel of a gun, it will not light because the oxygen in the air outside it is only 20% and it can't get in where the fire is. The amount of oxygen required to support combustion is far more than could possibly be incorporated in the chamber of the gun. The Chinese invented gunpowder, and 75% of it is potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate is not a fuel of itself. It's an oxidizer. It's the same as the oxyacetylene torches I show and use. They need oxygen. Even a blow lamp needs oxygen. 20% of the air is oxygen. And that allows burning at a sensible rate. If you add extra oxygen, you get a more severe and fierce burning. So nature has designed it such. So there are fires which are burned by, or started, or kept going by oxygen in the air. And these can be stopped by dousing them with water or a fire retardant or a foam or whatever, because that cuts off the oxygen. The two things needed are oxygen and the fuel. And when you cut off the oxygen from the fuel, you put out the fire. Also, when you wet material, it makes it harder to ignite in some circumstances. Blacksmiths often wet their coal to get the fire going. But generally speaking, the wet water, if you wet newspaper, it leaves it harder for it to enkindle. But it's the cutting off of the oxygen that's important. If you look at this ship and you look at the Felicity Ace that sank last year, you will see it doesn't have big open decks. It's kind of boarded up the whole way. It's not a passenger vessel, so the view doesn't matter. Okay, so what has been put across, and it's a comment there made by CHINI Crinny1, CHRINI Crinny1. Funny, so funny that you old pal, that'd be referring to me as you old pal, know the cause of the fire. Now, there will be an inquiry, of course, and of course the officialdom cannot really give a cause or effect which would conflict with a possible inquiry into it, in which case they'd be found with egg on their face. But there are plenty of comments there, so we apply the common sense test to it and my knowledge to it. If this were ordinary cars, they would need more oxygen to burn in that way. There would be an opportunity to use fire equipment and firefighting equipment to douse it with water. There wouldn't be the extreme heat because of the cutting off of oxygen. It would take a long time for the fires to spread between cars because it doesn't spread with the same ferocity. Yes, of course, the plastic in cars, the petrol and the diesel in the tanks is inflammable. It's flammable, whichever the right word is. It's capable of going on fire. But the fuel is in tanks. It's sealed in tanks and the lid is closed. So it doesn't get at it as easy. You'd have to raise the temperature of the tanks quite high. And in the case of diesel, you'd have to raise it very very to get combustion. Now, who's to say someone didn't leave a blow lamp on in the back seat of a diesel Mercedes? You can't prove this, and it's unlikely it will be proved at this stage. But the crew may be able to report where the fire started. They may be. We don't know that. So I have to say to Crinny 1, well, you have a point there. But what there is no doubt about is what happened next. The fire that is aided by oxygen in the air will only burn very slowly. It is not self-oxygenating. Gunpowder is 75% saltpeter. It's 15% charcoal from wood. It is 10% sulfur, which lowers the ignition temperature, which was make it work in flintlock guns long ago. Flint ignited. It's still that. The proportion is 75 potassium nitrate, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur. And the majority is the oxidizer. And a lot of oxidizer is needed in the mixture. It's not a compound, it's a mixture. When that is placed in a gun barrel, there is no supply of oxygen, and when it's lit, the saltpeter and the other components burn together. The saltpeter provides the oxygen, and you get the explosion, which drives out the charge of shot or missile or bullet. Okay. Now, way back about 1886 or something around that, some scientist in France or something like that was experimenting with nitric acid and sulfuric acid, and he spilled some of it on a table, and he was afraid the wife would catch him, and he got the dishcloth and he gave it a good wash, and he washed it and soaked it well, and he gave it a rinse under the top, and he hung it up on the cooker, and overnight it dried. And when the fire was lit in the morning and the heat got strong, some little spark got on the dishcloth, and be dad or tea towel effectively. It was nitrocellulose, I suppose, was in that. It would be wood derivative, or it would be wool or something like that. It would be some fuel. It burned like that. And so he invented smokeless powder, which is used in modern ammunition. It's not, that's used on acid-based. It's not a high explosive, what fires rifle bullets and shotgun bullets nowadays. But it's the same idea. The main thing to remember is there is a built-in oxidizer. There is a built-in oxygen source, and a lot more oxygen is needed than fuel. Okay? So when you have such a mixture or substance catches fire, you cannot put it out with water. You cannot put it out anyway. It will burn out. Full stop, it will burn out. Now, of course, if you have a pile of gunpowder there and you wet it, you will stop burning, because it has an effect on the makeup of it. But you cannot put it out. But in the case of lithium ion batteries, we can do an experiment at some stage. Once it reaches the point of thermal runaway, where the components of the battery are burning with their own supply of oxygen, released with the heat, you cannot put it out even if you dip it into water. Even if you've got a full mobile phone battery and threw it in a bucket of water, it will burn away underneath the same as ever. You cannot put it out. Moreover, the heat is highly intensive. Moreover, they're going on fire all over the place. It doesn't matter what the reason is, they're going on fire. So while I can't prove the fire started in an electric car, I can say it is highly probable that the recent advent of electric vehicles is causing fires, because they're going on fire all over the place, all over China, everywhere. They're going on fire. And in China, the copper wires and the wiring they use is mean. They only put in absolutely essential amount of wire. As a result, they sometimes overheat and cause a fire. They're junk. Chinese make junk stuff. As I said, they're already dumping out 10,000 electric vehicles in China because they can't sell them. And there's a panic on among the great and the good that they can't sell these electric cars, and I'm not helping them. Okay, so when that fire took place, the heat obviously spread throughout the decks of the ship. I don't know if there were one or two. And that heat was intensive, and it became quite obvious. Nothing was going to put it out, because it cannot be put out. Even if you put it in a steel-sealed barrel, depriving it of oxygen, it will continue to burn. And that is why there's a problem with electric cars on ships. The upper deck got so hot that it forced the sailors to jump over, and one of them lost his life. Now, I would challenge Crin E1 to comment on that. You don't jump into the North Sea without a damn good reason. That is the fact. There are fires burned by air, oxygen in the air, 20%. You can add oxygen, as I do, and I have videos here using my oxyacetylene and propane oxygen torch for burning with higher amounts of oxygen, which can get up to enough to melt steel, no problem. But they all have a source of oxygen. The rockets going up into space have an oxidizer of some type, huge amount of oxygen produced from some chemical process. Okay, the fan, the old fan, and the fires long ago, and the old bellows, that was all to bring in oxygen into the fire and get it kindled and get it going. If it has an internal oxidizer, it does not need any external source of oxygen, and therefore trying to put it out by depriving it of oxygen won't work. Moreover, the heat is very intensive. The fire is frightening to look at. The smoke of it and all is indicative of what we see from this ship. And while they will not state the official reason, the fact of the matter is that there's an inquiry, so they cannot give it. Now, look now at the consequences. The Wadden Sea is in danger of this ship sinking. If it keeps burning, what they're doing is they're spraying the sides of it with water to cool the hull, keep the hull pressure, the hull segment above water cool. That helps to keep the ship from overheating. Meanwhile, the internal superstructure is heating. If the fire dies out, and it can only end by exhausting its own fuel supply, it can only end in that way. If there's luck, maybe it mightn't spread to other electric cars somewhere. But it can only end after a few days when its fuel is burnt out. The trouble then is if the internal structure of the steel ship becomes so hot that it buckles. If it buckles, the ship hull will collapse. And if it collapses, the whole lot goes down into the Wadden Sea. And yet, there's no mention of it on BBC, on Radio Television, or any of the woke left-wing media. This ecological disaster. You see the extent to which they will go to keep their lies and prevent people like me getting our say out. But they're not succeeding very well. They are some crowd. They are some crowd. So I now declare to Crinry one, it's hard to pronounce. That's the facts. There's an oxidizer built in to whatever is causing the fire on the Fremantle Highway. And that oxygen can only come from lithium batteries in the electric vehicles, of which there are only 25. And just consider that if 25 electric cars out of 285, I think actually it's 3,000 ships, 2,085, just get that right again. There are 3,000 vehicles on board. 2,850 were ordinary internal combustion cars. The other 25 were electric cars. And 25 can bring the whole ship down. I do not believe any internal combustion car would do that. You could go over, you could spray your water on it, no problem. You can't with this. There is no doubt that any inquiry will eventually reveal this. That'll be 3 or 4 months down the road, perhaps. It should be done sooner. But my question is this, and what I say is this. That was a specialised transporter. A ferry has cars on the bottom. It's a specialised transporter too. They're all mostly roll on, roll off. You go in the front, you come out the back. The ferry is the same, except it has the equivalent of a hotel on the top deck, with bedrooms, lounges, and all of that. And you could get a ferry crossing the Irish Sea, or going to France from Rosslare, and there could be 200, 300 passengers on board, including couples with children and all that, on that ship. Are you going to expect them to jump in? Will there be any report as to why there weren't lifeboats for the crew on this ship? Will we hear anything about that? I reckon not. In the case of the Felicity Ace last year, they were airlifted off by helicopter. What is the position with the ferries going across the sea? Are there enough boats to take all those passengers? Are there ways to get them down? Or will we end up buying the paper some morning and see a beautiful family wiped out, and big reports about Catherine, the eldest daughter? She was a great singer, and the other lad was a great footballer, and we'll have to read this stuff, and there's outcry and mourning all over. Why can we not act now? I call on the Health and Safety Authority, and I will be writing to them, to ban electric cars on ferries in Ireland, the UK, and Europe. Not to do so is nothing more than criminal negligence, and it will cost the lives of innocent people who only want to travel across by ship and by ferry. That's the hard fact. I believe I've proved my case. If I'm wrong, I'll put my hand up and say I'm wrong. I know in my heart and soul that the electric cars are burning all over the place, and they're burning, even they're brand new, in the best of good German ones at that, on ships the same as everywhere else. And this will continue until someday in the next few years, a dozen or more people will die and lose their lives and be burnt alive in this horrible way. That's my case. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'll see you back for something else. Thank you.